Yep. We have a couple minutes. Good morning. My name is Darren Cassidy. I'm the Acting Deputy Chief of the Police Department's Operations Division, and I'll be serving as today's Master of Ceremonies. On behalf of the Arlington County Police Department and the Arlington County Sheriff's Office, I would like to welcome all of you here today to our annual Peace Officer Memorial Day ceremony. We come together today to honor and pay tribute to the memory of these 7 law enforcement officers of Arlington County who gave their lives in service to our community. I would also like to acknowledge our brothers and sisters in law enforcement and other public safety entities from around the region and the world who continue to serve. Today, we are joined in person by the Honorable Matthew D. Ferranti, Chair of the Arlington County Board, as well as our County Manager, Mr. Mark Schwartz. Our remaining County Board members and County leadership are joining us virtually. We truly appreciate you taking part in this ceremony as we pay tribute to those who have made the ultimate sacrifice in the service for others. The crime law of 1994 permitted, for the first time, the national flag to be flown at half-staff in honor of the over 20,000 federal, state, and local law enforcement officers who have died in the line of duty. This week also marks the 16th anniversary of the dedication of our Peace Officer Memorial, which took place on May 16, 2005. This year, the names of 394 law enforcement personnel killed in the line of duty are being added to the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial in Washington, D.C. Those 394 officers include 295 officers who were killed during the 2020, plus 99 officers who died in previous years, but whose stories of sacrifice had been lost in history until now. Of note, 182 of the line of duty deaths were officers lost to the COVID-19 pandemic. At this time, I would ask that you please rise for the presentation of the colors by the Joint Arlington County Police and Sheriff's Office Honor Guard. Please remain standing as Corporal Jennifer Levy will now sing the national anthem.
say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Colors, right shoulder, off. Colors, order, off. There, flip. Ready, cut. Ceremonial at ease.
Thank you, Corporal Levy. You may be seated. Acting Chief of Police Andy Penn and Sheriff Beth Arthur will now present a wreath in memory of the Arlington County officers killed in the line of duty. I would now like to introduce the Acting Chief of Police, Andy Penn, for welcoming remarks.
Good morning, and thank you for joining us. Today, we solemnly gather to honor the brave men and women who lost their lives while in the service and protection of their communities. In moments of uncertainty and danger, these officers willingly and without hesitation risk their own by placing themselves in harm's way for the peace and security of others. Their unwavering devotion to their fellow community members and their selfless acts of heroism demand and deserve our recognition. This year, we honor the 295 law enforcement officers who died in the line of duty throughout 2020. Their names, now permanently etched into the walls of the National Law Enforcement Memorial, serve as a profound reminder of their sacrifice. Their acts of valor forever binding them with the officers who lost their lives in previous years. Their tragic deaths remind us that we must never take our safety for granted. Today, we reaffirm our commitment to always remember their sacrifices, to honor their service, and to live by their legacy. This past year, the law enforcement profession was faced with unprecedented challenges during the COVID-19 pandemic. While many throughout the world shifted to online and virtual workplaces, police officers and other frontline personnel continued to serve in their communities, providing essential services during often very unpredictable circumstances. Tragically, 182 of the 295 line of duty deaths this past year were COVID-related, highlighting the risk police officers and all public safety and for other frontline workers face during the pandemic to ensure the safety and well-being of their communities. The heartbreaking way these officers lost their lives tells only part of these hero stories. The fallen officers are fathers, mothers, sons, daughters, brothers, sisters, coaches, mentors, and veterans. Their loss is devastating to their family, to their friends, their coworkers, and their communities. To those who have lost a loved one in the line of duty, I recognize the enormity of their absence from everyday life is constantly felt. While no ceremony will take away the pain or grief that you feel, I assure you the law enforcement community stands alongside you in honoring their distinguished service, and we pledge to never forget their sacrifice. As I stand here today in the shadows of Arlington County's tribute to our fallen officers, my heart is heavy with the loss of each of our heroes. Special Police Officer Lewis Shaw, Detective Russell Petty, Officer Arthur Churovich, Officer Israel Gonzalez, Officer George Pomranning, Officer John Buckley, and Corporal Harvey Snook. They gave their lives for a safer and more secure Arlington. Each day, I am proud to wear the same badge as these brave men and to continue their work in service to the Arlington community. As a department, we remain connected to these fallen officers through a shared set of values: service, courage, sacrifice, compassion, respect, integrity. All very powerful and meaningful words, but in the law enforcement profession, these are more than words. They are the basis from which we operate as we work to uphold the Constitution, protect the rights of all, and pursue justice on behalf of victims. While we remain connected to our past, this is also a time of change and transformation in our profession. A time to continue moving forward by building trust and confidence through transparency and strong community-based partnerships, which are vital to public safety. Today, as we remember the men and women who gave their lives in service, I ask all those who wear the badge, let us also honor them and their sacrifice by being the very best that we can be. We must all pause to reflect back on what drew us to this profession. Why law enforcement? Many of us sought this profession to serve, to lead, to protect, and to give back. Especially during this last year, when so many questions have been raised about policing, we must remember why we became police officers and remain committed to our solemn oath. To those who have served or are currently serving, I want to say thank you. The work that you do is incredibly important and makes a difference in the lives of those around you. I am routinely inspired by your unwavering commitment to making our community safer and am deeply honored to serve with you. I also want to express my gratitude to the family and friends of law enforcement officers. None of us can do this job without the love and support of our friends and family, so we thank you for your service as well. In closing, I would ask that we all keep the fallen officers and their families, as well as those currently serving, in our thoughts and prayers. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Penn. Auxiliary Lieutenant Charlie Neal will now read the roll call of those who have died while serving the Arlington County community.
Good morning. It is again my honor to read the roll call of those peace officers who have died while in service to Arlington County. Richard E. Crane, Lewis Shaw, Louis Elliott, Michael Seraphin, Russell C. Petty, David C. Kidwell, John R. Height, Philip E. Lucas Jr., James D. Howell, Walter L. Smith, Arthur Chorovich, Walter E. Bell, Leonard J. Burnett, John Sedgwick, Harry A. Totten, Israel P. Gonzalez, George L. Pomranning Jr., Robert Harner, John W. Buckley, James C. Winland, John C. McGinnis, John W. Rouse, Richard Ziegler, Michael K. Causey, Robert E. Roof, Blaine M. Novak, Malay T. Brim, Randolph Ice, Dennis Webb, Jefferson McMichael, Gregory Johnson, Robert McFarland, Harvey Snook III, Edwin Hill. Seven of these Arlington County peace officers lost their lives in the line of duty, and their names placed in the Hall of Heroes. On December 6, 1935, Special Police Officer Louis Franklin Shaw lost his life in the line of duty when his police cruiser was struck by a fuel tanker on U.S. Route 1 near 4 Mile Run Creek. Officer Shaw and his partner were transporting a prisoner from Alexandria to Arlington when they came upon a disabled vehicle. Officer Shaw remained in the cruiser with the prisoner while his partner assisted directing traffic for a tow truck to remove the disabled vehicle. As Officer Shaw sat in the cruiser with the prisoner, a gasoline tanker truck failed to notice the cruiser striking it, pushing it into a telephone pole and causing it to burst into flames. Officer Shaw and the prisoner perished in the fire. We'll now have a moment of silence while a rose is placed on the statue of Special Police Officer Louis Franklin Shaw. On January 20th, 1954, Detective Russell Clinton Petty lost his life in the line of duty while he and other county police officers and sheriff's deputies were attempting to serve a sanity hearing warrant. While searching the subject's residence, Detective Petty was fatally shot by the suspect. We will now have a moment of silence while a rose is placed on the statue for Detective Russell Clinton Petty. On December 5th, 1964, Officer Arthur Chorovich lost his life in the line of duty while responding to a fire call at the Virginia Square Shopping Center. His motorcycle collided with a vehicle on Washington Boulevard. He was buried with military honors at Arlington Cemetery. We will now have a moment of silence while a rose is placed on the statue for Officer Arthur Chorovich. On October 25th, 1972, Officer Israel Peter Gonzalez lost his life in the line of duty during a bank robbery at the Arlington Trust Company in Crystal City. Officer Gonzalez entered the bank to conduct a routine bank check and encountered one of the robbery suspects disguised as a telephone workman. Officer Gonzalez was shot numerous times. He succumbed to his injuries at Arlington Hospital. We will now have a moment of silence while a rose is placed on the statue for Officer Israel Gonzalez. On September 2nd, 1973, Officer George L. Pomranning lost his life in the line of duty while transporting a prisoner. Officer Pomranning and his partner, Officer Gerald Dawson, had arrested a suspect that was believed to be under the influence of drugs and who struggled during the arrest, making a full search difficult. Officer Pomranning sat in the back of the cruiser with the subject. During transport, the subject pulled a gun from his boot, shooting Officer Pomranning 3 times, mortally wounding him and wounding Officer Dawson. We will now have a moment of silence while a rose is placed on the statue for Officer George Pomranning. On April 15, 1977, Officer John W. Buckley lost his life in the line of duty during a bank robbery at the Virginia National Bank on Columbia Pike. 2 subjects entered the bank, took an undetermined amount of cash, and shot out the surveillance cameras. As the suspects ran out of the Glebe Road entrance, they were confronted by Officer Buckley, who was responding to the silent alarm at the bank. Shots were exchanged, and Officer Buckley was struck in the chest and succumbed to his injuries at Arlington Hospital. We'll now have a moment of silence while a rose is placed on the statue for Officer John Buckley. On January 14, 2016, Corporal Harvey Snook lost his life as a result of cancer, which was contracted while working in the rescue and recovery operations at the Pentagon following the September 11, 2001 attack. Corporal Snook was working patrol that day when he responded to the Pentagon after American Airlines Flight 77 struck the Pentagon at 9:38 a.m. He remained working at the site for the following week, collecting evidence and the remains of victims. He was diagnosed with cancer related to the recovery efforts on September 9, 2014. We'll now have a moment of silence while a rose is placed on the statue for Corporal Harvey Snook. As is written on the Peace Officers Memorial Wall, it is not how these officers died that made them heroes, but how they lived. Thank you.
Thank you, Lieutenant Neal. I would now like to introduce the Chair of the Arlington County Board, the Honorable Matthew D. Ferranti, who will present the County Board proclamation for Peace Officer Memorial Day to Chief Penn and Sheriff Arthur.
Good morning. I just want to briefly share how often I'm struck by how on any day what you do could end up asking you to pay the ultimate sacrifice that these officers did in the course of the history of the Arlington County Police Department and public safety. So please know that the board is mindful of that. Others on the board, we would have all wanted to be here. COVID as we learned from the 182 police officers who have passed, has been a very, very difficult year, and it's right to be safe. I'll now read the proclamation, but I wanted just to provide you with that note, following on Acting Chief Penn's thoughtful remarks about the care and the honor of being here today. Whereas the crime law of 1994 permits United States flags at all government buildings to be flown at half-staff in honor of Peace Officers Memorial Day. And whereas Peace Officers Memorial Day recognizes the unconditional sacrifices of more than 21,000 federal, state, and local law enforcement officers who have died in the line of duty. And whereas on this special day, the Arlington County Board and the citizens we serve hereby pay tribute to the ultimate sacrifices of Arlington County's fallen officers: Special Police Officer Lewis Franklin Shaw, Detective Russell Clinton Petty, Officer Arthur Churovich, Officer Israel P. Gonzalez, Officer John Buckley, Officer George Pomerang Jr., and Corporal Harvey Snook III. And whereas Arlington County believes it is important to unite with federal agencies, state and local governments across the country, and the families of peace officers who have been killed in the line of duty in memory of the officers and in support of their families. And whereas we all recognize and praise the valiant efforts of Arlington County's law enforcement officers currently in service who have pledged to protect our lives from violence and disorder, and our property from theft and vandalism. Now, therefore, I, Matthew D. Ferranti, Chairman of the County Board of Arlington, Virginia, do hereby proclaim May 10th, 2021 as Peace Officers Memorial Day in Arlington County, and urge every citizen to take a moment during this day to remember those law enforcement officers who have given their lives in the service of the people in their communities and across the nation. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mr. DeFerranti. At this time, representatives of law enforcement and community organizations will present wreaths in honor of our fallen heroes. Arlington Police Beneficiary Association. Arlington County Deputy Sheriff's Association. Arlington Coalition of Police. Fraternal Order of Police, Nova Lodge 35. Arlington County Emergency Communications Center. Thank you all. At this time, I would ask that you please stand and face the American flag as it is lowered to half staff to pay tribute to our fallen heroes.
Colors. Attention. Right shoulder. On. Colors. Present. On. Colors. Right shoulder. On.
I would ask that you please remain standing as we now play Amazing Grace. This concludes Arlington County's Peace Officer Memorial Day ceremony. Please keep these officers and their families, as well as those currently serving in the law enforcement community, in your thoughts and prayers throughout the day. Please remain standing for the retiring of the colors. Thank you.